Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Jack Foster with the solid, not completely solid, black hat here. There is a logo on it. Is that a Triple H logo? What is that logo?
Thank you for asking, by the way. This is the first time anyone's asked me about this hat, and I've worn it so many times. This is a Hindsight Hero hat.
Okay.
The band. It's my cousin's band. Go check them out.
Okay.
Pretty good. I got a couple of songs on YouTube. You can find Spotify. But Hindsight Hero. Good, like, alt rock. I would dub it as that genre, I guess. It's a female lead singer. She's amazing. I know her well. But my cousin's the guitarist. So Hindsight Hero.
There you go. Where are they based out of? Here? Tennessee?
Nashville.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like you are like an alternate rock metal type of listener.
Mean, honestly, my cousin's band is like on the more mellow side of my listening taste, but I still think they rock. But yeah, I'm a hard rock metal guy through and through. Metallica, Avenged Sevenfold, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Have you been to one of those concerts? Are you an earplug guy when you go to these metal shows? Or
honestly, it depends on the venue. It's weird. Like usually people think it's the other way around, but when you go to smaller venues like say the Mill and Mine or Marathon Music Works in Nashville that hold like 5K, it's all floor. I never wear earplugs at those shows because I just don't think it's as loud. But when you go to big arena shows, man, is it deafening, and especially with bigger bands like Metallica, Sevenfold, which are the two biggest bands I love. Their shows are always going to be the loudest because, that's just when you have elite equipment, you have elite setup, you're going to be louder, So I wear earplugs at those shows.
Have you seen them both in person?
Oh, Chase, I've been to 45 concerts in my life.
Wow.
Yeah. That's my thing. I have like 8 this year, already set up. So
what's the big one this year?
I'm going to Metallica twice in the same weekend to kick off May in Nashville. They do like 2 shows in a given weekend. That'll be my 4th and 5th time seeing them. I got Sevenfold in Soldier Field in Chicago with System of a Down in September. Those are the 2 biggest shows I have, and that'll be my 6th time seeing Sevenfold. So,
wow, I love that you're calling them Sevenfold. You're just like I'm on a good
A7X. Yeah, it's a long band name, so you got to abbreviate somehow.
How old are they? They've been around for a little bit. They're getting up there, right?
Yeah, Avenged Sevenfold's been around since really the turn of the century. But 05 is kind of when they hit their stride. Metallica's obviously been around since the early 80s, so they're old. Any Metallica show I can go to now, I kind of treat it as the last one. Like this one in May, I'm like, this could definitely be the last time because they're in their mid 60s, but they still are just amazing. Like it's the best act I'll see. I think Sevenfold's my favorite band, but Metallica performs the best.
Jack Foster, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and say, and the listeners can compare and contrast. You've lit up talking about Metallica and Avenged Sevenfold in a way that no one else has ever seen from Tennessee athletics or anything else. Like you might have found your like other thing to cover, dude. It's like, you're in, man.
I've honestly thought about it a lot. I'm like, should I have gone into some sort of music journalism, content creation? There's a way to do that. There's a path to that. And who knows, maybe if sports media ends up not working out some time down the road, I'll do that. It's definitely my other love. I don't know which one I love more. Probably depends on the day. But yeah, hard rock.
You're passionate, man. Passionate is obvious. The passion is obvious for Jack Foster when it comes to Metallica and Avenged Sevenfold.
Yeah, definitely.
If you only can see one, who do you see?
Oh, yeah. Metallica puts on the best show. It is just, it is an experience like no other. No other show compares. Sevenfold's great, but Metallica's 20 years older than them, and they sound better. They're more sharp. I don't know how to describe it. It's just, and like I said, it's more of an experience than anything else.
We could do a story where you force Ryan to go to Metallica or Avenged Sevenfold show with you, and
we'd have to start him small, like Shinedown, Ultimate.
No. We don't want to start him slow because I want to see like the real reaction of Ryan at one of these shows. Let's just see if he can make it an hour. Let's see if Shump can make it an hour.
I think anyone who likes music in general would love a rock show. You can wear earplugs, all that, and protect yourself in that way, and obviously get a seat. You don't want to be near a mosh pit, especially if you're not into that stuff. I'm not even into that stuff. But yeah, no, I think rock shows are the best type of live act out there. And of course I'm biased, but it's more impressive. It's just more of an experience.
It's almost easy. I think that's one of their
Yeah.
songs, right?
Come back to me. It's almost
Yeah,
easy.
yeah.
Okay, so okay, there we go.
Hey, I'm a cultured
Applause for Chase.
I'm a cultured individual, Jack Foster. Many forget. A man of they don't call me the sports renaissance man for nothing.
There we go.
I wear a lot
Mad
of hats
respect. Mad respect.
Well, Jack Foster, we have some Tennessee future bets to talk about here on today's program. We also got some Tennessee baseball with their first big weekend. It could be weird depending on how the weather cooperates for Tennessee this weekend, because the weather does not look good on Saturday. But that might be okay, because the best game, I think, is probably going to be the Battle of the Liams on Friday night. That's kind of going to be the main event for the weekend, with Liam Peterson versus Liam Doyle, with the Gators coming to town, and who beat, like, what a bad break for the Florida to draw Florida State and Tennessee in the same week, the final two undefeated teams on the schedule for Florida in the same week. But they beat the Noles, and we'll talk about what Tennessee is in store for here on Friday at Lindsey Nelson Stadium. But before that, Jack Foster, as we continue our offseason future best bets for football, who, in your estimation, do you think is in best position to lead Tennessee in sacks in 2025?
Yeah, this is really tough. This is the toughest one I think we've done on these podcasts so far, with these preseason bets for football, or off-season bets, I should say. And I'm going to say Josh Josephs, and I know he hasn't really been a big sack guy so far, and frankly, it's because he just hasn't been on the field a ton. James Pierce has, dominated from the Leo spot the last 2 years, but I'm going to stick with that spot and say Josh Josephs leads Tennessee in sacks. And I don't know who's going to be that interior presence for Tennessee this year, or if there will be one that compares to Omar Norman Lott when it comes to getting after the quarterback. Maybe David Hobbs could be that guy, but I'm going to stick with Josh Josephs for now. And, I know we talked about the other week, about third downs and how important that role could be for Jordan Ross, and maybe he could lead Tennessee in sacks. I think he's a dark horse. Caleb Herring, I'm not going to bet on. He has only 1 sack in his first 2 seasons at Tennessee, and it actually came in 2023. So I'm going to say Josh Josephs as my answer, but Jordan Ross is in the mix, and maybe an interior guy can take that crown this year. I just wouldn't feel as comfortable betting on it.
Yeah, Caleb Herring's kind of in that Roman Harrison zone to me, where it's like he's solid, but I don't see like I don't know, it just doesn't seem like he's going to be a big sack guy. Like, he seems like a depth guy at this point. It's a big year for him. We'll see what it looks like. But I mean, now you've got a lot of talent behind you. I mean, you got Christian Gass coming in, who seems like they're going to start him at Leo, not start like on the field, but like position wise, start him at the Leo spot. Yeah. That it's a crowded room. And
always is.
Jordan Ross is not gonna, like, he's the lone 5-star in that room, and he kind of has like the similar twitchy frame that Pierce had. That I think for me, I can understand like the Joseph is probably the safest one, but I don't know. Like, I don't know if Joseph's is going to have that kind of final breakout year on the edge. I don't know if that's kind of his game. I think he was really good last year, and played a lot of good snaps for Tennessee, but it just doesn't. I think when it comes to sacks and the guys who might break through, like Omar Norman Lott was in that conversation in the interior. Like, you mentioned David Hobbs, like that one's like one of those sneaky ones to me. Like, I wonder if it's somebody in the interior that we're not expecting that kind of steps up, because there's so many snaps to have, like with so much gone with Omar and Amari and company, that and Elijah Simmons, that there's a lot of snaps up for grabs. So if David Hobbs is a big spring and summer, if he's playing a lot of snaps alongside Bryson Eason and Jackson Moyes, he's someone who kind of fills that Omar Norman Lott role, and he gets up to the quarterback, and you look at the end of the year and you're like, man, David Hobbs was like number 2 in sacks in the interior. Was really disruptive. I think that's possible. I don't think it's going to be anybody on the strong side defensive end spot. Like, I don't think any of those guys are going to move the needle in that regard. Hopefully it's Tyree West, or Tyree Weathersby, but that's kind of a TBD on that one. I would still lean Jordan Ross, just because I think he's going to play. Like, I think Tennessee is going to be more aggressive rushing the passer than what we saw a year ago, because I think Banks, my gut is that they thought they would be able to win and get home against Georgia and Ohio State, sending 4 with the kind of talent they had, and it didn't happen. My gut is Tennessee's going to be more aggressive rushing the passer this year than they were a season ago because they have more trust in the secondary. They have more trust at linebacker. My gut is they're going to rush more. And I think it's going to be several guys who have a solid amount of sacks. I think Tennessee's going to have more team sacks in 25 than they had in 24.
Okay.
So I think it might be a really close call when it's all said and done who has the highest sack total. Like I could see a situation where let's say Joseph's, Ross, and maybe David Hobbs are all within like 3 sacks of each other, like something
Right.
along those lines.
Yeah, it's hard to see someone just absolutely dominating that
Yeah.
category. And it really didn't happen last year. It did 2 years ago with Pierce, but Pierce led last year. But it, like you said, the sack numbers were just kind of down. Pierce only had 7.5 and still led, by 3.5. Norman Lott had 4. So I maybe we see more sacks from Tennessee this season, but I agree that it doesn't feel like there's one that's definitely going to separate. And it could be just really spread out to where the sack leader is similar to last year, and that it's in the 7 to 9 range, and no one even has double digits.
That's fair. Next up here, Jack Foster. We've got which freshman? So Tennessee had one true freshman starter last year on the team, and it was Boo Carter at star. If you had to pick one player who is most likely to have a Boo Carter true freshman impact anywhere on this team, who do you think it is?
I feel like this is kind of there's only one right answer.
It's going to be David Sanders.
It's David Sanders. He's going to start. And I think he's the only true freshman that's going to start. And I don't know how much of a competition it's going to be for David Sanders, right? Like, I just think he's going to start at right tackle. And, we'll see if he can be as impactful for Tennessee as Boo Carter was. It's 2 vastly different situations and obviously positions, but I think Sanders will have growing pains early. It's a tougher spot to start as a true freshman than what Boo Carter did last year. I think we can agree on that too. But, looking at this freshman class and who's going to get, opportunities, it's obviously David Sanders. I guess if I wanted to throw another name in this, because he hasn't played for Tennessee yet, but isn't technically a true freshman, that would be Braylon Staley, who I think could, have a really solid season out of the slot and be good for Tennessee and, have a really solid impact. And, maybe not as much as even Boo Carter did last year, but, when it comes to Sanders and Staley as the really young guys, I know Staley's the same age as Matthews, but we've seen more from Mike Matthews. So just as far as the unknowns and the new young players, I think you look at David Sanders and Braylon Staley as guys who could have impacts as a true freshman and redshirt freshman.
It's interesting you throw Staley out there because because he's a redshirt freshman, so it's a little bit different. I think Travis Smith is going to have an option. Like, I think there's a lot of pressure on Chris Brazzell to settle in at that third wide receiver spot because I think you can just pencil in Braylon Staley and Mike Matthews on the other side. That Travis Smith, 6'3", huge kid.
You know who Travis Smith adores, right? You know who's his favorite receiver of all time?
Who?
You see that? Julio.
No. Oh,
Falcons
fantastic
legend.
Stuff. And as an Atlanta guy,
Figured you'd love that.
I mean, where's Shump when you need him? Because he's gonna his eyes are gonna roll in the back of his head when he hears this. But he came from a powerhouse at Westlake, and hey, Westlake football is really good, and Travis Smith was extremely productive at Westlake last year. And they had a lot of, they're starting off at the tackle, Lon Gaston. He ends up at Georgia. There's just a lot of talent on that Westlake team. And it's just highly competitive football. Like 7A football at the high school level in Georgia is just about the best you can get anywhere across the country. Tennessee's got a couple of those guys. Justin Baker, running back from Buford, Jaden Perlotti, there's just a lot of talent there. Tyler Redmond and Dylan Lewis from Milton, another powerhouse in the area. But I can go on and on and on. What I'm saying is, like, Travis Smith, I think Tennessee does not have a player like Travis Smith in there on the roster right now in terms of his size, length, and his catch radius, where he's confident. He, like you said, he loves Julio Jones. And my gut is because they're so thin and because it seems pretty open in terms on the outside, like Chris Brazzell's your lone upper class returner. I could see Travis Smith finding a way at some point this year into that starting lineup if Chris Brazel's struggling early on. I think there's a lot of pressure for Brazel to settle in and be that number 3 reliable guy. But it wouldn't surprise me if it's not working after a month and after the Georgia game or something, they try Travis Smith. And I feel like he's a good bet to at least factor. I think he'll factor in more than what we saw from Matthews or Staley as true freshman a year ago.
I mean, it sounds fun. The thing I always go back to with true freshmen on any Tennessee team under Josh Heupel is that Josh Heupel just hasn't given true freshmen a lot of opportunities, so far in his tenure. He was kind of forced to with Boo last year because of the Jordan Thomas injury. I don't think Boo was going to get those kinds of opportunities, at least early in the season, had Thomas never gotten injured in the preseason. So I just always am hesitant to say that true freshmen are going to definitely get opportunities and could overtake an upperclassman for a spot, such as a Chris Brazel, because of Heupel's track record there. Look what happened with Mike Matthews last year. There were people clamoring for him to get more playing time all year long, and it just never really happened. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, Brazel didn't impress last year. He could be ho-hum again, and then that could open a door for Travis Smith, but I would just not be willing to really bet on that.
The final one I would throw out is like a great buy low, and not because of like talent or anything, but just in terms of I don't know how much Garner is going to rotate or what he's going to do there. But Isaiah Campbell at strong side defensive end is someone that I wonder how much he's going to play, because I think he has a potential to be the biggest difference maker at that position since Tyler Barron. And he was a sneaky great late flip from Clemson for Tennessee in this cycle. I think he was a top 50 player overall. He got a 5th star at the end of the final, I think, on 3 rankings. He looks good early in spring practice. I think he's number 47 for folks who are watching these videos at Rocky Top Insider, with just the greatest B-roll and royalty-free music on the internet. Right, it's fantastic stuff. I wonder, because Dominic Bailey really didn't do well rushing passer last year, and I feel like he should probably slide inside, which is where Tennessee's needs are right now on the interior. And I think you just need more pass rush chops on that side. And I wonder if that door is open a little more. Tyree Weathersby, we haven't seen really since he's got to Tennessee. Tyree West has been kind of in and out of the lineup. He hasn't gotten consistent playing time. I wonder if he gets a real look. Or Marion Dye, who is another 4-star number 1 player in the state of Indiana. I wonder if one of those true freshmen, blue chip, strong side defensive ends get a real look to get real snaps on that opposite side, because they just need more twitchiness and more guys who can get after the passer and win on that side. And I don't know, Isaiah Campbell and Marion Dye are 2 extremely talented players, but especially Campbell, that I wonder if they push for opportunities.
Maybe. I mean, look, Tennessee has to be better at getting after quarterback with 4 this year. Yep. There's no way of getting around that. And I think Tim Banks and Garner and Heupel know that. So if after the first couple of SEC games, halfway through the season, Tennessee's still struggling to do that, maybe they can switch it up a little bit. I would, again, it's just, there's so many upperclassmen. You talk about Weathersby, who he's had injuries, and it feels like this year could be the year we finally see what Tyree Weathersby can do. I think Tyree West is a heck of a player. Obviously, Don Bailey's there as the elder statesman of the defensive line. So I just find it hard to believe a true freshman can make a true impact. But if Tennessee's just really bad at getting after the quarterback with 4 yet again, they're going to have to change something. And maybe that could require some young blood to get in the mix.
And to put a bow on it, David Sanders looks the part, man. The fact that dude's a true freshman, in the early workouts.
Well, yeah, we all knew this was going to happen. It's just...
but actually seeing it where you're like, yeah, he could be a plug-and-play guy, and then you see him out in the practice field, and you're like, oh, he's absolutely a plug-and-play guy. David Sanders is, he looks like a junior. He looks like he's ready to go. He
looks the part, right? I think everyone has to temper some expectations about him being able to handle the likes of Georgia and stuff like that, at least early on. He's going to have growing pains in the SEC, and that's okay.
But he's gonna be good, man. David Sanders is just gonna be really good at Tennessee. I'm really excited. You just see it and you're like, oh, whatever he's at, right tackle, left tackle for the next 3 years, David Sanders is going to be. My gut is Tennessee's gonna be just fine at that spot. Okay. Yeah. It's gonna be a very big difference from Campbell and Dane Davis to David Sanders this year.
It's definitely true. Yes.
Baseball though, Jack Foster. This weekend, Lindsey Nelson, SEC conference play is here finally. Liam Doyle just been absolutely electric on Friday nights for Tennessee. What have you seen from him though this season, and what do you think makes him just special and so good on the mound for Tennessee on Fridays?
It's the fastball, the rise on his fastball. Cannon Peebles talked about it. Recommend you go check it out. The media availability is on RTI's YouTube page, but it's from last week, the midweek game, not this past week, not West Georgia, but a week ago, or maybe it was game one. No, yeah, it was when they had the no hitter against St. Bonaventure. It was Friday night. Cannon Peebles talked about how great Liam Doyle's fastball was and the rise on it. And, that's what's made Liam Doyle so lethal. And Cannon actually said, we had AJ Russell. I thought that was the best fastball in the country. And then he kind of stopped himself. He goes, it still is from the right side. But now we also have the best fastball in the country from the left side. So it's the fastball that's just been borderline unhittable. And, look, he's given up 6 hits and 1 earned run on the year. The 1 earned run was a little solo homer from Sanford, which was weeks ago at this point. It's insane what he's doing. He's averaging just under 12 strikeouts a game. You take that pace and you give him 14 regular season starts, which he's projected to do. He'll have 164 strikeouts at the end of the regular season. That would smash a program record. You give him 19 starts, which is what Luke Hochaber had, who holds the UT record from the 05 season. Then he has 223. It's unbelievable the strikeout numbers Liam Doyle has. He's striking out batters 77% of the time on his outs. He has 61 outs this year, 47 are via strikeout. That's 77%. It's ridiculous. And the pace isn't going to continue, but you have to look at what he's been able to do. And yeah, there was one team that was really tough in this stretch. It's not all, as Shumpert likes to say, Mickey Mouse opponents. And, St. Bonaventure, Sanford, some of these guys have had dudes, but let's face it, the competition is weaker in the non-con. But he did it against Oklahoma State in a big league park too. So I'm putting my chips all in on Liam Doyle, being able to stay dominant. Obviously, the pace won't be the same, and he'll get touched up a little bit more. But I'm taking his fastball over anyone's in the country right now, and I'm taking Liam Doyle as the advantageous matchup for Tennessee every single Friday night.
He's just I had high expectations. Shump had him as like his pitcher of the year nationally. Like there was that kind of buzz. I mean, he's so confident. He feels like he's always been a Tennessee guy. Like there was never anyone who was like more ready to be a Tennessee Volunteer than Liam Doyle.
Yeah, him and Fisher, both the Ole Miss guys.
I mean, they were just built. They were just built for playing for Vitello and company. But Doyle, I mean, the strikeouts are unbelievable. I can't wait to watch this battle between him and Peterson tomorrow, though. These are two electric first-round guys going at it. And I don't know. I think it's going to be really, really fascinating to see what they look like. But Tennessee's had a lot of success with transfers as their Friday night guys over the years. And I think Liam Doyle is the best thus far. We'll see how he plays come SEC tournament or SEC conference play, but there's not a better start than I've seen from Liam Doyle.
No, it's absurd. And I will say, if there's one thing you need to watch out for with Liam Doyle's outings moving forward, is that you want him to be better in the first inning. You don't want these 6 to 8 pitch ABs in the first inning to where he's throwing 20 pitches. You want Liam Doyle on the mound as long as possible. And Tony's not going to throw him 120 pitches. Like, it's just not going to happen. 100, but 120, no. So his time is limited. If
that's for AJ Russell when he gets back in April.
Sure, yeah. The ABs are going to be long, then his time's going to be limited on the mound. So he knows that. He's talked about how he needs to be better early in games. Sure, he's still winning these battles, but they need to be faster, at least early. So look for Liam Doyle to, I think the storyline for a Liam Doyle outing will be written fairly early as far as how long he's going to go, given how many pitches he throws early.
And I love the combo of Doyle and Franklin.
I'll tell you what, Franklin's one, I'm curious because he was awesome those first couple weekends and he's still been good. We haven't seen a true Tanner Franklin, Liam Doyle stack since Houston. And that's when Franklin was at his worst against Oklahoma State. So, what does he look like against Florida? I think he and Phillips are the two I'm most intrigued by arm-wise against the Gators. So,
what do you make of Dean Curley at leadoff thus far? It's kind of wild that he has not gotten. I feel like he's just going to be a first rounder. He's just good. He's not getting the kind of pub that I would have expected him to get. And I think like so much of it is just the transfer success of Gavin Keelan and Andrew and Liam Doyle and Andrew Fisher. I think part of it is the freshman sensations around him too. It's
Right.
like, I mean, you have Levi Clark, who is otherworldly at this point as a true freshman. So I just think there's other stories that are just overtaking what Dean's done at the top of the lineup. But what have you made of Dean thus far?
I think it's been fine, and I don't think there's any reason to change it. I know Jay Abernathy was the name everyone floated around as the leadoff guy, and while that certainly still could happen down the pike, I just think what Tennessee has right now with the consistency offensively in those first 4 or 5 is really good, and there's no need to change it. Maybe you can swap Inslee and Clark, but outside of that, I don't think you need to change any of the 5 right now. And Abernathy's been a solid option in the 9 hole. You see the downside with him, though. He struggled in Houston, so Abernathy can go cold at the plate. I think they're still trying to figure out what he's best at the plate too. But you're talking about Curley. Yeah, he's just been overshadowed because Clark's the freshman who can, hit nukes, and a grand slam against Sanford with the game tied late. And Gavin Keelan's power numbers have been insane. Not as good of a weekend against St. Bonaventure, but what he did in Houston still carrying over a bit. And the average is there for both those guys I mentioned, Clark and Keelan. And then Fisher's been the story really in the past week of hitting 6 homers in his past 7. The power's finally coming. And, it's just hard to give Dean Curley the spotlight he probably deserves, I guess, because of everything else that's been going on around him. And he hasn't had those big moments. It feels like he's had a lot of solo homers, just homer here, homer there, nothing like huge. He's not gone 600 in a given weekend. He's always flirting around, 335, 300. He's very consistent. He's arguably Tennessee's most consistent bat so far. But yeah, it's just he hasn't wowed, I guess, enough to have a lot of pub around his season, if that makes sense. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Obviously, he's still been one of Tennessee's best bats. That's just the nature of what's happened for Tennessee baseball this season.
I love it. Final thing here, Jack Foster. Will Tennessee ultimately stay perfect this weekend against the Gators? I talked to Graham Hall of Swamp 247 yesterday, previewing the channel, and he made the point of like, hey, if Florida doesn't take advantage of Peterson on Friday, this could get ugly in a hurry. Like they need to start strong against Tennessee, and steal the first game, and then you feel like they're in a better position to steal the series as a whole 2-3 if they can surprise Tennessee with Peterson and company on Friday. But if they lose and they don't take advantage of Peterson on Friday, that it could get ugly and Tennessee could be in line for a sweep. Which way do you lean for Tennessee?
I don't think Tennessee's going to sweep Florida.
Mm.
I'm worried about Saturday. I'm still a little I'm not trying to hate on him. I'm just worried and concerned and very interested to see what Marcus Phillips looks like against SEC offense. Like,
yeah,
you didn't get to see it in Houston against great competition. He played Rice, so he still hasn't played a really good team yet. So I think Saturday could be the day. I know they're starting Aiden King, who's the true freshman. I believe he's only had one start this season, and it was last weekend, and he did really well. He was a great bullpen arm before that so far. He has 0.55 ERA on the season. So this dude's good, and he's young, and maybe he can't pass a tough test in Tennessee's offense. But yeah, it could be a higher scoring game on Saturday, and I just don't know if Tennessee's going to be able to sweep Florida. Obviously, Sunday, both TBA as far as who's the starting pitcher for each side. I think you'd probably expect a Coons or Arvidsson for the Vols. But I'll give the edge to Tennessee on any day 3 right now, assuming there's not just a great arm on the other side because of the depth of the pitching staff. So I'm going to say if Tennessee loses a game, it's Saturday. And I would predict that to happen. It's just hard to see them, staying perfect against a great SEC team, given what's happened.
Jack Foster, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Omaha Productions and Rocky Top Insider this week?
Yeah, of course. Coverage for every Tennessee baseball game this weekend against Florida over at RockyTopInsider.com. Live at bat by at bat threads every single game. So be sure and check those out. New SV pod this weekend. Stanford Steve recapping his experience at the SEC women's basketball tournament with his daughter was really great. The guys complaining about how conference tournament championships don't really matter in men's basketball, which is, kind of unfortunately true. Always college football. We got a Big 12 and SEC preview this week, and the Mina Kimes show. Of course, free agency going wild right now. So a lot to talk about on that show. And we actually had 2 episodes this week because she felt the need to do an emergency Seahawks pod as a Seahawks fan. She's going through it as of late, no doubt.
Yeah, it seems like they're headed towards a rebuild. Like it's going towards a rebuild. Sam Darnold can't get any help though. Like he's another rebuild, it's just like he's probably gonna lose a lot of games and he might be all right, but we'll see what happens with the Seahawks. But it seems like they're going the wrong way. Jack Foster, always a pleasure, and I will talk to you next week. All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas podcast where I'm now joined by Volquest's own Grant Ramey in all black, so you know who it is. Like, I don't even have to say his name anymore. Like, it's just like when you see on the screen here on youtube.com/Chase Thomas podcast, you just see the all black get up with the Volquest production behind him, and you're like, oh, it's Grant Ramey. It's Grant Ramey time on the podcast.
It's my thing. It's in my head at this point now. I'm like, I'm going on the podcast. All right, find all the black. Not that it's hard that I have to reach for it or search for it. It's just there.
Well, you need to encourage like Rick to not do the gray anymore. The gray's doesn't work. The gray, he's got to go black or orange or white.
Yeah,
my wife is very much in on this. She's like the gray Rick can't go with the gray anymore.
Yeah, don't take this out of context, but he thinks he looks awful in orange, Tennessee orange, which
Really?
I'm very surprised. They've got him in an orange pullover probably at least 3 games this year, and that's probably 3 more times than I'd seen him in orange the last probably 8-9 years. Like, he just didn't do it. He just didn't think he looked good in it. It was no offense. That's why he didn't want to wear the orange blazer. Well, he says he didn't want to wear the orange blazer because he didn't want to make it about him and all that stuff because, Tennessee coaches used to do that against Kentucky and Vanderbilt. But he thinks he does not look good in Tennessee orange, so he would always go black, gray, white, whatever.
That's interesting. Sneaky. I wonder. Does he get his wife's input? Is it just a Rick thing?
I don't know. I would imagine it's a Rick thing. He's an opinionated guy. When you get him off the basketball topics and stuff, he believes what he believes, and he feels strongly about it.
Hold on. Now, my follow-up to this is, like, what is that he would be most okay with you sharing that he's most opinionated on that's not sports related?
Well, I heard a story back in the day that one of the first times he walked in Thompson Bowling Arena as Tennessee's head coach, there are these concrete walls that are behind that are at the end of the grandstand, the end of the stands, between the stands and the floor. There's floor seats, but where the actual fixed seats in Thompson Bowling Arena, there's a concrete wall that runs the length of the floor. And that concrete wall, when he got there, was orange. And he said, that's too bright. Like, we can't do that. Like, we need that wall to kind of blend in a little bit. So we need to paint that wall black. Like, that's kind of the detail that he had. And then at Pratt Pavilion, they have pads along the walls around their practice court. And he wanted those pads to be black. But they took a long time to figure out what kind of black they wanted those pads to be. Like one of those color swabs where it was like, how many different versions of black can there be before they finally settled on one? So he is very particular about certain things, including his basketball team.
With uniforms, right? It's always been rumored like he has a very he has a uniform preference where like certain uniforms are just not happening in the Rick Barnes era. He's traditional.
They had some smoky grays back in the day, early in the Nike era, and they wore them against South Carolina, and that's when South Carolina was a pretty good basketball team. And South Carolina hammered Tennessee pretty good in Knoxville. And Rick said after that, like, we're never wearing that uniform again because we were too worried about what we looked like and not worried about what we played like. And he's loosened up a little bit, like that black uniform that they introduced this season. He was talking about that back in the summer. Like, he liked what the baseball team looks like, and he wanted basically a basketball version of that baseball uniform, that black dark mode uniform, which is pretty much what he got in terms of just all black straight up and just Vols across the chest and the numbers. So I think he's loosened up a little bit. And they've also introduced that cream Vols script jersey as well that they wear in big games. So I think he's, with age and passage of time, he's loosened up a little bit.
Finally, we'll get into actual hoops content here, Grant. What do you think is more likely? the return of smoky gray hoops uniforms, or Tennessee wears the orange helmet that they have not also worn since South Carolina. We're learning here it's just bad juju with new uniforms with the gray for hoops and then football with the orange top. What do you think we are most likely to see back?
I think you could see the orange helmet again at some point. I think the orange helmet, the problem is I don't think it completely matches the home orange jersey. It's been really hard to match that helmet tone and the jersey tone. And if you wear those two things together, it's going to stick out. So I think they got to do a better job of matching those two things to get that to get orange helmets to come back. And if so, it's got to be a home game, because you would think a November homecoming kind of opponent that you would want to wear those against, because you obviously don't want to break them out for a big game on the road, because we've seen in the past what happens sometimes that's a bad look when you're living in South Carolina and you've got a new orange helmet that you're rocking and all that stuff, and the bad memory that goes along with that.
Yeah, I'm okay if they retire it. I don't need it. I think it was. I didn't really love it. It didn't really look like Tennessee to me. It's fine. Like if we never see it again, I think that's more than okay.
Well, I mean, your traditional helmet's great to start with. The black helmet is great to start with. The smoky gray helmet, for the last, how many years has it been now? 10 years since they switched to Nike and added the mountains on it and all that stuff. I thought it was one of the coolest alternate helmets in the game in football. So it's hard when that's the bar to try to cross. It's hard to cross that bar, because that's a high bar
for sure. Grant, I need your help here. It pertains to Rick Barnes.
Okay.
It's something I've been made. I don't know where you stand on this issue. You might. I'm curious where you ultimately fall here, Grant. I think it's in Tennessee's best interest to not have an extended stay in Nashville this weekend. They might just lose out of, hey, it's hard to beat Texas A&M twice. It was one of the biggest wins of the season, which feels like forever ago, that Tennessee won in College Station in really, really impressive fashion. Like probably the most arduous game on their schedule up until that point, from Texas A&M on, where you're like, okay, if Tennessee's going to get a 1 seed, they're going to have to steal one like at A&M, and they did it. And I don't know. I have a hard time believing. I mean, I'm wearing a Hawks hat as an NBA guy here, Grant, in the era of load management. And if I pulled any team trainers right now across the NBA and I brought them on the pod with you and I was like, hey, do you think it's in the Tennessee's best interest to play Zakai Ziegler 38 minutes for 3 games straight and against 3 top 15 teams, potentially, for the potential of getting a 1 seed, based on what Lunardi and company are talking about with, like, hey, if they win the 1 seed, that final 1 seed still up for grabs. And I'm like, well, it's also in the best interest of the powers that be at a certain network to encourage a great showing this weekend, because if they all go for it, like, it's just there's other competing factors at play there. I don't know what to do. I feel like Zach Galifianakis in The Hangover, Grant, where he's like, or pretending to be mad with the group, where he's like, oh, dang it. Like, that's how I'm going to be if Tennessee loses to A&M in Mississippi State fashion last year, where I'm like, oh, we got embarrassed. Wade Taylor dropped 32 points and like pretend to stomp around, because that's what I just feel like I'll be.
Shoot, darn.
Yeah, that's me. That's me. Because I'm just like,
we fudged up, guys. We fudged up.
You know what I'm talking about, but that's how I'm going to feel if Tennessee has an early exit on Friday, where you have to like kind of pretend that like, oh yeah, no, oh, I hate that we don't get Auburn on Saturday on 24 hours rest. What a bummer.
I mean, because a year ago, I mean, they went and fell on their face in the SEC tournament against Mississippi State. That was arguably the worst 40 minutes of basketball they played all season. Because even when they went to North Carolina and got hammered in the first half, they played really well in the second half of that game. And they were coming off that senior day loss against Kentucky when Reed Shepherd and all those guys shot the lights out in Knoxville. So you're going into the tournament with 2 straight losses and looking bad, and the vibes weren't great. And then you go on an Elite Eight run. And you can think back to 2022 when Tennessee won the SEC tournament in Tampa. Kennedy Chandler went off. Looked like one of the best point guards in the country. And they had won a crazy amount of games in January, February, March, it felt like, leading into that postseason. And then they go on that run in Tampa, and then they go to Indy for the first weekend, and they kill Longwood in the first round. And then they get bounced by Hunter Dickinson and 11 seed Michigan in the second round. So with that in mind, it does feel like you don't want to go there and fall on your face and look bad and have questions going into next week. I think the happy medium is getting to Saturday, looking good on Friday, getting to Saturday, and then there's no shame in whatever happens against Auburn, the best team in the country, the number 1 team in the country, all that stuff. Maybe you can split hairs and say maybe Duke's better than Auburn, all that stuff. But a really, really good basketball team in Auburn, a dominant team in a dominant league. So I don't think there's any fault there. I think the disaster scenario is getting to Sunday and Florida being on the other side, and you can't really prove anything because the bracket's probably going to be done that Saturday night, and Florida's already projected as the 1 seed, and they have that inside track. So it's, yeah, I could side with you and say, you know what? It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to come home early from that thing. You just kind of want to come home with not with a bunch of questions like you did last year. Just kind of avoid that scenario where you just get blitzed for 40 minutes and you look awful and you can't score the basketball.
But I mean, you did make an Elite Eight, and if you don't run to Purdue, I mean, it's a Final Four team, so it didn't really matter.
No, and that's the thing about the NCAA tournament is, like, when you go into it feeling the worst, like 2023, I didn't think they were getting out of the first weekend. Everybody's picking them to get beat by Louisiana because they had lost to Kai Ziegler. Nobody really knew what was going to happen next. And then they handle Louisiana. It's a close game in the final minute, but they handle Louisiana, and then they go and they just physically punk Duke to go to the Sweet 16. And as soon as you start thinking maybe the bracket's opening up and Florida Atlantic's the team that's in the Sweet 16, it's Madison Square Garden, it's New York City, all that stuff, it falls apart. Then last year you're going into the tournament thinking this team does not look good right now. Like, they're struggling. What we've seen from them the last week and a half, whatever, it's been bad. And then they kill St. Peter's, and then they go through Texas, and then they go through Creighton. It's all the high seeds. Like, there was no upset craziness in that bracket, and they just went through the best teams on their path to get to Purdue, and then they play Purdue until the final 5 minutes. So it's a very backwards tournament where you feel bad about a team, and then good stuff happens. You feel good about a team, and then bad stuff happens. The bracket opens up, and you feel like you can waltz to the Final Four, then something happens, and then the bracket doesn't open up. You know it's going to be tough, and somehow you keep advancing in it. So it's always very backwards. It's madness for a reason.
For sure. When you think back to game 1 of the season, I know it feels like forever ago, but who do you think has improved the most from what you saw the first game of the season to now on this Tennessee team?
This season in particular, I would say Igor he just looked very kind of not lost, but kind of treading water a little bit, trying to figure out the speed, the pace, and all this stuff at this level against Indiana in that exhibition against whoever they opened up with, Gardner-Webb. Mm-hmm. I would probably go Igor start of the season to the end of the season, even though he struggled a little bit here down the stretch. Year over year, probably the most different player has been Jordan Gainey. I can't really remember what he looked like early in the season. But what he did at Illinois is what he's done when he has to take over kind of as point guard, what he's done just as the sixth man in general, the shot maker, the guy that can get to the rim, the guy that can pull up at the elbow, the guy that can shoot the three really well. He's just been a really big, versatile piece for this team, a huge guy off the bench that does a lot for them. So I would go probably with one of those two players, depending on if I could get away with the Jordan Gainey answer to that.
Yeah, I wonder with Gainey, because I don't know. I mean, in the summer, I would have been interested to see what he looked like in the summer and spring. Like if the light bulb kind of turned on and there was just something different where it was just kind of, because I think he's just been one of Tennessee's three best players all year long. And I think Tennessee is ultimately going to live and die with the big three, with their guards and what they ultimately look like come tournament time, because if they get good games from all three at the same time, I think Tennessee is really, really hard to beat, especially if the defense is there. The defense is there, and the three guards are able to dictate the game in their terms and stay out of foul trouble. I just think it's really hard to beat Tennessee. But the Igor part of it, I don't know, because I think Cade had his best game in a long time on Saturday. Someone who played 12 minutes before in his previous two games before Saturday, and he's only had a couple 20-plus minute games this season for Tennessee. But Okpara being as gassed as he was against Ole Miss, and just kind of what's on his plate with Noah Estrella all year, and Dubar just not being a consistent guy down low either, that it's just a lot's fallen on him. And he's been good. Felix has been a really good player for Tennessee. But Cade's got to play. And I think he's someone that they are going to have to get 10 to 14 minutes out of just to relieve some of these guys. And he's versatile, and he's having to do stuff maybe he wouldn't necessarily want to do as the primary backup five, because it's like as versatile as you might be, we kind of need you to be this kind of player to help us down the stretch with just our roster limitations. But I don't know. I mean, the Igor stuff, I don't know if it's fair, but I've just kind of been like, he's Olivier Conlois, and it's just kind of he might swing a tournament game for us, and that
he might score. He might
Yeah,
score
like
26 against Duke in the second
yeah,
round
like
and make
great.
threes and start shooting arrows on the court like Olivier was in that game.
Yeah, think about. I felt so bad for Igor in the Ole Miss game because he has the highs of highs, comes in late after sitting for a while, didn't look like he was going to close again for Tennessee, hits a 4-point play, celebrating, super excited, and then to just, I still don't really understand what happened with that final shot and how he lost the ball and stuff, but like you just hate it for him because you're like, that was just such a great like. It was just great moment where it was just kind of a vindication potentially for him and to build some confidence. And you're like, dang it, I hope this doesn't just kind of go back to, okay, Igor, he lets this loom mentally. Because I think it's hard for athletes. I mean, it was a tough spot. And it's also maybe the difference in the 1 seed. The stakes are just high. And that's when you're playing the kind of basketball that Tennessee's playing. But I don't know. I just think Igor has gotten better from what we saw a year ago. But like Gainey from what we saw just previous season to now, is gigantic. Like I don't know where this team would be without Jordan Gainey this year because he's just been fantastic.
It's crazy to think about where he came from. Like he came from USC Upstate, and it's like, is Tennessee just taking this kid because his dad's on the staff and all this stuff? Like he put up great numbers at Upstate and shot it really well, especially from three. Especially his freshman year, he shot like 49% or something absurd. And you still kind of had questions as last year played out, like how is he going to transition to this level? Is he going to be a guy that can really help this team? What he's done year over year has been crazy. Like he is legit one of the best players on the basketball team and one of the most clutch players on the basketball team. I mean, you think about that Alabama game, and everybody thinks about Jemiah's shot at the final at the horn, but you think about the close of the first half, Tennessee's down 7, and Gainey goes coast to coast to lay it in like he did against Illinois and draws the foul and turns it into a 3-point play and gets it. I mean, the difference between a 4-point game at halftime and a 7-point game at halftime is huge. And then you think about how the game ended and how huge those points were. What he did against Illinois, what he's been able to do when he goes to point guard and Zakai moves off the ball, and sometimes the offense flows a little bit better and it looks a little bit better, and people aren't just standing around waiting on Zakai to do something. Like that's been huge for Tennessee. They've needed him. And I agree on Cade. Cade has been very, very good in terms of the progress he's made year over year. I like that he just checks in and something's going to get wrecked. Like he's going to fight somebody for an offensive rebound. He's going to fight somebody for a defensive rebound. He's going to block a shot. He's going to catch a lob, something like that. Like you put Cade in the game, something's going to happen. He can't foul like he's done recently. I think he had 2 pretty quick against South Carolina. Felix, the same thing. He's kind of struggled with fouls a little bit here down the stretch. So both of those guys are going to have to be available and ready to go and have good games in the paint because Tennessee needs to play inside out to a degree to have success, and they need those guys to be available and on the floor for sure.
I'm glad you mentioned the Gainey part of it against Bama because I think that's one of the things. Because, I mean, it's been complicated with Meshack, right? Like, it was a great story. That was a great ending for Meshack in that game. But what I said after, because I think there were a lot of people, like, there's been some infighting from Vol Nation on Meshack. And I think a lot of it's bad faith and these arguments where I think reasonable minds, like you and I talked about, I think last month, where it's just kind of like, hey, I think there is a case that Gainey should start over Jemiah. Doesn't mean Jemiah shouldn't play, or doesn't mean Jemiah's not a good player for Tennessee. It just, the numbers are what they are, and the eye test is like the 3 guards. Tennessee is at their best when Gainey, Zakai, and Chaz are on the floor together. Like, it just is what it is. And there was a happy medium of like Jemiah at the 4, where if Igor doesn't have it, so that works. So that it kind of solves itself there. But with the slow starts, different things, like I think there was reasonable minds can disagree on that without it just being like a hot take fest of like, oh, Jemiah's this or Jemiah's that. And I think Jemiah's been really good for Tennessee in a lot of ways, but I also think in that game, like you said, Gainey had a more important game, I think, for Tennessee winning that. Like, Jemiah hit the shot, but if you go back through that whole game, Gainey was paramount in Tennessee beating Alabama. And I think that's one of those things where like, oh, you see, like that's why you don't down Jemiah. And I'm like, I mean, Jordan Gainey was really good in that game. Like, Jordan Gainey didn't hit the game winner that everyone's going to remember, but like Jordan Gainey, like you said, going coast to coast at the end, and he just, even with the shots not falling from deep, he drives, he draws fouls, he's active, he's shooting shots at the elbow. Like, he's just a very polished veteran player that just helps Tennessee so much when guys like, I mean, Zakai isn't really looking for a shot right now. Like, if he's not going to put up any shots and he's going to have like 1 shot in the first half, it's like, all right, well, where are the looks coming from outside of Chaz? Like, and he's not really a self-creator in his own right. He's gotten better, I think, down the stretch with some self-creation, but I don't know. I think Gainey is just, he's kind of like the do-it-all kind of player for Tennessee. And I don't think either of us thought that was coming based on what we saw last year.
No, and the problem with the the Gainey Meshack conversation is it's too often turned into an either or conversation when that's not it. Like it's not if Gainey's on the floor, Jemiah's got to be off the floor. It can be a lot of different combinations. Jemiah at the 4 is great. They've played a lot of good basketball with those 3 guards, Jemiah at the 4 and then Felix at the 5. Like that's fine. Like the emphasis on you're better when Gainey's on the floor. And I think you're better when Shaq's on the floor too in different ways because he's going to help you one way or the other. And it's not one guy's on, one guy's off. It's not that black and white. There's a lot of gray area where Tennessee plays good basketball with both of those guys on the floor, with one of those guys off the floor, whatever. They have a lot of different combinations despite being so limited. I do agree that Chaz has been a better creator since probably that Texas A&M game where he started jab stepping and driving left a little bit and doing all that kind of stuff. I mean, what he did in the second half against South Carolina was pretty special. He also kind of disappeared in the second half at Ole Miss. He's got to be more consistent there half to half, especially this time of year when you can be one and done if things don't go well. So, there's a lot of different lineups. There's a lot of different combinations. It was just never an either or conversation with those 2.
Final 2 things here for you, Grant. Would you rather, because it seems like Tennessee's going to end up in either Houston or Duke's bracket if Tennessee's a 2 seed. Who do you think Tennessee would be better off getting as the 1 seed in their bracket? Because, I mean, it ultimately was the difference between Tennessee making a Final Four a year ago, just getting saddled with Purdue and Zach Edey and company. Who would you say that Tennessee would be better off getting in an Elite 8 matchup if it comes to it?
Oh, boy. I mean, there's not a good answer to that. There's not a good answer to any questions about which number 1 seed would you rather. Because Houston's going to play it slower. Their pace is more like Tennessee's, but they are efficient on offense. People think Houston and they think defense and they think physicality and they think kind of like Tennessee, drag you down into the mud. But you look at their offensive efficiency numbers, they're kind of like Virginia under Tony Bennett. They play really slow. They don't score it a ton, but they're very efficient with their offense in that pace that they play with. And they got guys, LJ Cryer, all those guys that they can score it. They're a really, really tough basketball team. With Duke, ever since that Tennessee Duke game in 2023, John Shire, no offense, he recruits like a madman. Like he recruits as good as anybody, any coach in college basketball. And Cooper Flagg is exhibit A of that. Just in big games, I don't know that we've seen it like in March, like NC State last year. Like that's a Final Four team. You got to find a way to beat your rival. I know they were an 11 seed and all that magic run that NC State was on, but you got to find a way to win that game. Cooper Flagg though might change that because he's the best player in college basketball. He's the best two-way player in college basketball. You look at his defensive numbers; he's got one of the best defensive box plus minuses. I think he leads the country in that stat, which is crazy. To be a freshman and to do as much as he does on the offensive end and to do it on defense. You also look at Duke. They haven't played a close game in a while, not since, I guess, Clemson when they lost at Clemson because the ACC is so terrible that they're winning by 30, 35 every single night, which respect to them. That's what you're supposed to do against bad opponents, and they've been doing that lately. So, I mean, pace-wise, I guess Houston would be your preference. If you're looking at Duke, maybe if you can find a way to slow down Cooper, then you see what the other guys can do, but there's really no good answer to it. I guess I would go Houston just because of the pace and the tempo, and it would be kind of a little bit of the Spider-Man meme in terms of the defense and the physicality of a Kelvin Sampson game against a Rick Barnes game.
What if we get like a surprise, like if you get the late 8? You remember how Estrella played Zach Edey?
Yep.
Like Estrella out of nowhere, no ramp up. Estrella has just been waiting for the opportunity to get 12 minutes of Cooper Flagg, and it's just Cooper doesn't know that he's going to be available. He's a late addition, like JP Estrella personality type. He rolls in on the scooter, but then he magically it's just in pure wrestling, like Kevin Nash with the fake, with the when he's in the wheelchair and he just hops up and he takes the blanket off. That's what Estrella does in the Elite 8, and he's like, I'm ready. And like Estrella's actually been cleared for a little bit, and we see JP Estrella against Cooper Flagg.
That would be a theme for JP because out of nowhere at the Elite 8 last year, he is. Yeah. There's that one possession I'll never forget, man. He just puts a bar in Edey's back and he's defending him. He kind of puts a little turnaround and JP puts his hand up and he doesn't miss a shot. He misses the shot, and then JP gets the rebound. I'm like, man, who is this kid, and where did he come from? Like playing Edey this tough in this kind of environment. Man, it's fun to think about what Tennessee could be with JP this year, and it's fun to think about what JP is going to be in the future because I think he's going to be a really good basketball player.
Final thing here, Grant, is this Rick Barnes' best coaching job at Tennessee this season?
It's been very impressive. That 17-18 team was a bunch of three-star kind of no-name underdogs. What he did with Admiral, what he did with Grant, finding Grant and and turning him into a 2-time SEC Player of the Year and an All-American and all that stuff and the pieces. This team has kind of reminded me of that team in terms of the way all these pieces kind of fit together. Dalton is Dalton, and getting him here and having that year he had last year, I think you could put it up against 17-18 as his best coaching job because, you start the year with 11 scholarship players, then you lose JP in November to foot surgery, then Cam Carr goes to Baylor in December. You're down to 9. Bishop Boswell doesn't really do anything. Into the bench kind of guy, freshman, as you'd expect. So you're really looking at 8 guys. And Darlin Stone-Dubar has been hit or miss when he can give you something. It's nice, but that just hasn't been something you can rely on. So you're looking at like a 7-man rotation that you can rely on. And to go through the SEC the way they did, to go 3-4 over 3 weeks in January, and to be able to rebound the way they did, there's disappointments along the way. But here you are going into the SEC tournament, and you're talking about a comfortable number 2 seed. You're not falling off that number 2 seed line, and you could potentially have a shot at a number 1 if stuff goes right and things fall your way in Nashville. So what he's done, what I thought this team was against Indiana, what I thought this team was against Gardner-Webb, I just thought they were pretty average. I didn't think they'd be that great, and they have been very, very good.
I lied. I have a quick rapid fire here. No AP, Grant Ramey, but I'm going to throw 3 names at you. You have to get percentages here.
Okay.
Nate Ament is a Tennessee Volunteer next year.
2%.
Oh.
I just, gosh, 37%. I mean, he's got a connection.
Yeah.
Tennessee's putting in the work. Not that they're not putting in the work on Nate. I just think that's just a battle Tennessee's not going to win. But Braden's mom, was a softball player at Tennessee. There's a little bit of a connection there. They've gone to California a lot to see him, so I'll give him a better shot than Nate for sure.
Final one, Chance Mallory.
Probably 51.2.
Okay.
He's announcing March 22nd, which everybody kind of thought, maybe he's going to wait and see what. He's a former Virginia commitment.
Mm-hmm.
He's from Charlottesville. So when Tony Bennett retired, he opened up his recruitment. I think everybody's kind of thinking, well, maybe he's going to wait until Virginia does something, but I don't think Virginia's going to do anything before March 22nd. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe I just haven't been paying attention there. But I think Tennessee is the main competition for Virginia, and Virginia doesn't have a head coach right now. So you think that would lean in favor of the Vols, but that's just an educated guess on my part, speculation. Don't hold me to it because it's recruiting and whoever knows.
I love it. We haven't had a 5-star in a while. Let's get Braden Berries in here. We haven't had him in a while, and they haven't needed him in the last couple of years, obviously, but it'd be nice. I very much enjoyed the Kennedy Chandler experience.
Yes.
And I think people just associate Keon. It didn't go quite well, but Keon obviously has a lot of talent. He's playing really good basketball for the Nets right now. But Kennedy is like the ultimate what if that no one talks about in terms of like Zakai, because Zakai might have been a 6-man for years and has a very different Tennessee career if Kennedy is like a multi-year guy. If he doesn't go straight to the NBA and he sticks around, because you can make the case Kennedy was the best point guard in college basketball that year. And if he sticks around just a little bit longer, you give it 2 to 3 years. Do we feel about Kennedy the way Tennessee fans feel about Zakai in a lot of ways? That's a sliding doors type of deal that I think is kind of always going to be lost, is that Zakai coming in from Colorado, like that Colorado game where it's like, oh, I don't think Zakai is going to be a start. Like he might just be a 6-man. You can't even, like, it feels forever ago. We were like, Zakai's playing 38 minutes. He doesn't even sit out an entire second half anymore. And I don't know. It's just, do you ever think about that? The what if? I'm just adding these questions, but this is, I don't know. I just think about that a lot of late. It's just the Kennedy Chandler sliding door moment.
It's actually been a conversation on our message board recently because everybody's been talking about the career that Zakai's had. And it's like, don't forget how good Kennedy Chandler was that freshman season. Like for a freshman 5-star point guard, in-state kid to come to Tennessee and pick Tennessee over, a lot of blue blood schools that wanted him, and to be the star that he was in a one-and-done year. You can go back and look at his numbers, especially what he did late in the year, going to that SEC championship and winning that tournament. It's just unfortunate that he didn't get to a Sweet 16. It's unfortunate that Michigan bounced them in the second round in that game in Indy. I think that kind of makes it, you kind of forget about the year that he had because of how disappointing the ending was. But you think about what he was as a freshman, what he could be as a 4-year college player, man, he would have been incredible. And that's not to take anything away from Zakai. Zakai has been a legendary Tennessee basketball player over the last 4 years. Part of Zakai is the story where he came from, how he was kind of discovered by Tennessee, how late in the process, and how quickly he kind of became the heart and the soul and all the adversity that he's overcome during his career, his basketball career as a whole. So, yeah, but do not forget about how good Kennedy Chandler was as a one-and-done freshman. It would have been incredible to watch him for 4 years. Also, respect to Zakai for not being afraid to come here and compete with Kennedy. Respect to Kennedy for being a 5-star and not being afraid that, hey, they're adding this point guard in August. Who is this guy? Rick actually said the other day that he jokes when he talks to Kennedy now. He's like, man, we should have redshirted you and started Zakai just to get at Kennedy. So that's just think about that class, what they had in the backcourt alone is incredible.
Goodness gracious. Well, go subscribe and read Grant and his great coverage over at volquest.com if you're not already. We got Nashville this weekend, and we'll see how long Tennessee hangs around, but a lot of Tennessee hoops coverage either way with the NCAA tournament starting next week as well with Selection Sunday. It's here. It's March, as some might say. It's March, Grant.
It's the best time of year. We survived January. We survived February, as Bill Parcells said. That's why you lift all them weights. We did it. We got to March. Now it's time to have some fun.
Grant Ramey, always a pleasure, and I'll talk to you very soon.
Thanks for having me, man.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.